The world woke slowly at the river's edge. Mist clung to the water like something reluctant to leave, and the river ran shallow at the bend, so clear you could see the stones beneath it, amber and gray, polished by seasons no one had bothered to count. Willows trailed their fingers across the surface. Near the far bank, a heron stood perfectly still, looking for all the world like a brushstroke someone had forgotten to finish. The camp was modest. 3 structures stood near the water. A lean-to of lashed pine, an open-sided shelter wrapped around a fire ring, and the beginnings of something larger. 4 posts sunk into the earth, their crossbeams still raw and pale as cut bone. Wood smoke and river mud thickened the air. Somewhere upstream, a woodpecker kept up its steady knocking. Spring had become something else now, not quite summer. The days had stretched longer, and the heat rolled in waves off the southern fields, waves that felt like a promise and a warning all at once. Kaito had been in the Borderlands for 41 days. He knew the number exactly. He had stopped pretending he didn't count. He crouched at the riverbank and washed his face with both hands, staying bent forward afterward, water dripping from his chin while he studied his own reflection. It rippled. He thought he no longer looked like himself, or perhaps he looked exactly like himself now, and the man he had been before was the stranger. He straightened, rolled his sleeves down, and adjusted his kimono, a working man's indigo, frayed at one cuff and mended at the collar with thread a slightly different shade. Then he looked at the 4 posts. "One more beam today," he said quietly, to no one at all. He said it like a promise, or a reminder. Saya was already moving when he reached the construction site. She worked the way water worked, finding the path rather than fighting the terrain, lashing a crossbeam with braided river grass and strips of bark, her hands following a pattern she seemed to have invented herself. Her hair was tied back with a length of cord. She didn't look up as he approached. "You were staring at the river again," she observed. "I was thinking," he answered. "Thinking looks the same as wasting time from where I stand." She pulled the lashing tight, tested it with both hands, shook the beam once, twice, and nodded to herself. "The eastern wall needs—" "I know what it needs," she cut in. "What it needs is a second pair of hands and timber we don't have." Kaito crouched to examine the base of the nearest post, digging his thumbnail into the wood to check for rot. His face was focused rather than discouraged. He wasn't pretending confidence. He was genuinely inside the problem. "Kenji said he'd be back by the new moon," he said. "Kenji says many things. He's brought what he promised, every time." She paused. "Once more is still the first time he doesn't." She glanced at him then, just briefly. Her expression was not cold exactly. It was the look of someone who had been proven right about things she'd wished she were wrong about. The woodpecker sounded again, farther off, and the heron lifted from the river without a sound and became sky. The road from the north was not really a road. It was more like an agreement, a cleared path where the trees had decided not to grow, wide enough for 2 carts abreast, the earth packed hard by some old traffic, some old purpose. The mountains stood visible from there, their peaks still carrying snow that never seemed to melt. A carved stone leaned at the road's edge, worn smooth of whatever it once had said. No one from the settlement had walked that road yet, not all the way. Kaito had stood at the carved stone once in the evening and looked north until the light failed. He hadn't gone further. He told himself it was because there was too much work. He knew it was something else. Kenji appeared not from the north but from the southern tree line, pulling a small cart heaped with covered bundles and whistling something tuneless and cheerful that never quite became a melody. His merchant's coat was dusty, his sandals were terrible, and he looked exactly like a man who had been walking since before most people woke and was delighted about it. "I bring lumber," he called out before he was close. 3 bolts of undyed hemp, and news that is either very good or very strange, possibly both." Kaito walked to meet him, and they bowed, his own bow a little deeper, a habit from another life. Kenji waved it away. "What's the count now?" "The building? 4 days more if the weather holds." "People," Kenji said. "I meant people." Kaito paused. 11. Kenji nodded slowly, set down the cart handles, and pulled a cloth from one bundle to reveal rough-cut but dry planking. "There is a family. The Mori. 3 adults, 2 children. Farmhands in the outer provinces. The estate they worked burned in the spring floods. They have a cart, 2 goats, and no destination." "You told them about us?" "I told them there was a place. I did not promise what kind of place." Kaito looked down at the lumber and ran his hand along the grain. His jaw worked once as if he meant to speak, then stopped, then began again. "We don't have room." "You have 4 posts and an idea," Kenji said gently. "Room is a thing you make." Kaito's hand went still on the wood. He stared at the grain a long moment, and this was the real cost. Not the lumber, not the labor, but the weight of saying yes when yes meant adding a family to his failure should he fail. He did not hide it. "Tell me the strange news," he said quietly. They stood at the carved stone together, the three of them, beneath a flat and shadowless noon light. The mountains loomed, and the wind came down from them, carrying something cold underneath the warmth. Pine resin, stone, and something else. "A traitor," Kenji said. "Coming from the North Road last week. He said he came through the pass, and the pass is passable, barely, but he made it." "No one uses that road," said Saya. "He did. He said he'd traded with a settlement on the other side. In the mountains. A small one. Quiet. Organized. Not hostile." The wind moved through the grass around the stone, leaning all one direction, as if it were listening. "Demons," Saya said. "He didn't say—" "What else lives past those mountains?" No one answered. They stood looking north. Kaito's expression had become harder to read. Not fear, not excitement, but the look of a man recalculating the edge of a map he'd thought he understood. "Did the traitor seem afraid of them?" he asked. Kenji paused, honest. He seemed surprised that he wasn't. Saya looked at Kaito. He did not look back at once, and when he did, their eyes held a moment, something wordless passing between them, an acknowledgement that the world they were building was not contained by what they had thought it was. There was a word, Kaito reflected. Soto. Outside. Everything that was not the circle you'd drawn around yourself. He had always lived inside other people's circles. His father's house, his stepmother's rules, the empire's careful arrangements. Now he was drawing his own, and the outside of it was larger than he'd thought, more complicated and possibly, not entirely a threat. By late afternoon, the clearing rang with work. Hammer strikes, the groan of levered wood, a grunt of effort followed by a breath of relief. Sora, 16 and gangly, the blacksmith's apprentice, was struggling with a post, shoulder jammed against it, feet slipping in the soft earth. Kaito didn't call out. He simply walked over, planted his feet, and set his shoulder against the wood beside the boy. Together, on three, the post sank into alignment. They stood a moment, breathing. "I thought I had it," Sora said, still catching his breath. "You did," Kaito told him. "I just made it easier." Sora looked at him with the open, evaluating gaze of a teenager who hadn't quite decided whether to trust someone but was leaning toward it. He nodded once and turned back to the next task, and Kaito watched him a moment longer. 11 people, he thought, and whatever the Mori family would become. And somewhere to the north, something a traitor hadn't been afraid of, and 41 days behind him, a city that had decided he did not exist. And before him, 4 posts, 1 beam, raw wood the color of new bread, the smell of sap still alive. The sun tipped low. Gold light flooded the clearing at an angle, and for one moment the half-built structure cast a real shadow, a full shadow, walls that did not yet exist, throwing a dark shape on the earth as though they already stood. Kaito saw it. He stopped walking and simply looked at the shadow of the building he had not built, laid out perfectly on the ground. His face did something quiet and private, not triumph, not relief, but something without a clean name in any language, the feeling of the possible landing gently like a heron on still water. The fire popped once, and somewhere up the northern road, beyond the carved stone, beyond the pass the traitor had walked in a fear he'd forgotten to feel, something watched the last of the light leave the peaks. It watched with calm, ancient eyes. And it was, in some way, that would take time to understand, curious. The river ran on, the mist returning, the world holding its breath.